Welcome to the panel discussion of the second Connect 21 Early Career Seminar. The Connect 21 project aims to bridge knowledge gaps in urban real estate research, and it is an initiative by the Urban Governance Research Network. UGoveRN, the Urban Governance Research Network, is an academic platform to build, share, and communicate research activities in the field of urban governance and planning. UGoveRN connects academics, practitioners, and communities who work in the field of urban governance to discuss and collaborate on research from an interdisciplinary perspective. And the network is particularly committed to rethinking how we can better govern urban spaces by strengthening the roles and the research of interdisciplinary early career scholars. We're very happy to have our panelists who were also the academic mentors of today's seminar. We have Isil Erol, who is Associate Professor of Real Estate, Finance and Investment. We have Nozeman, who is Emeritus Professor of Economic Geography at the University of Groningen. And we have Sina Shahab, who is Lecturer in Planning and Environmental Policy from the University of Cardiff. So maybe just to start the discussion, you, as the academic mentors, spoke to 4 early career researchers each. So I would like to ask you what you think is the key challenge that early career researchers face when conducting interdisciplinary research at this intersection of planning and real estate. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of that work, or the one that, based on your own experience or the talks we just had, stands out? Any first thoughts? Sina, would you like to begin? You're the youngest early career scholar / mentor of this session.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things is, at least for me, when you finish your PhD, what you realize is you know a lot about a very tiny thing, and then you have this opportunity to open up your research area, and of course explore different policy areas or different research projects, which is very exciting, but at the same time very challenging. So that's probably, I mean, that's what I'm going through it. And of course, I'm from one project to another, but I'm learning a lot. That is very helpful. In terms of particularly interdisciplinary research, what is often a bit challenging again is different disciplines might have different language. And these languages might not be easily being translated to each other, and that is often difficult. In particular, when we think about planning and real estate, we kind of like are stuck in the dichotomy of planning and market in a way. So where planning is all about, or like at least traditionally been all about regulations, and real estate is all about, some people might say is all about profit and the market side. So how you can merge these two sides together, and as I said, the dichotomy of planning and market really. So to what extent we need to have regulations, and to what extent we should let the actors or the market, form the market, and that's a very fascinating thing. And also every planning system might do it differently. Every legal system might do it differently.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and I see that in my own research as well, this dichotomy and the challenge. What would you then recommend early career scholars who face this issue? How to deal with that, especially if a lot of literature that we're reading maybe on our topic basically exhibits that dichotomy, and you want to do it differently. Anything practical that early career scholars could do to overcome this black and white thinking?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, we were actually talking earlier, and we were talking about the challenges of finding and talking to developers and the private sector. In practicalities of your research, you realize it's much easier to find public sector and to talk to interview them. And they are very open to share with you, but it's much harder to find developers. And then we were thinking about or real estate actors in private sector and how difficult it is to particularly talk to hard to reach people. And even though you might be able to interview or talk to developers, they might not be necessarily the representative of their sector and their type of actors. So again, your finding might be biased in a way. Sorry, I just gave more challenges, difficulties instead of answers.
Well, there's no easy answer, I guess, to a very complex problem. Isil, do you maybe want to share your key challenge that you have in mind?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you, all organizers. Actually, I have found the time, the opportunity to think my research. What is the missing points, because I'm just approaching from the real estate finance and investment, but my research related with planning, urban planning. So what I'm missing, actually, I end up that challenges, maybe sometimes opportunities, they're overlapping. But according to me, two basic challenges, if I approach from urban planner side, what is critical, I think it is a background economic theory knowledge is essential. What I'm trying to say is, as real estate researchers, we define real estate system. So it is very complicated interactions, complex interactions, and it is a system of asset market, space market, financial market, political economy. So it's a very, very big world here. So I think some urban economics, financial, transportation economics, some economic background is really, really important. For example, for the dissertations we have discussed today, one is related with conservation planning and real estate development. The other two related with real estate, again, development and financialization. Actually, apart from basic economic cost-benefit analysis, today we are talking about more sustainable finance, new logic of financialization. And actually, I can say that at the end of the day, all these redevelopment or development process, it is in a way transforming the built environment into urban asset, a new maybe investment asset for our perspective. But today, it is not only economic or financial value return we are discussing the social values, we are discussing environmental impact. So that's where urban planning is coming in the picture from our side. So this interaction is challenging. And one more thing, I think both planning practice and real estate researchers, we need to be updated, because global financial crisis and then COVID-19, everything is changed. I can say that real estate has become a mainstream asset class. So that's why more finance people are integrating to our research area. And we are talking about technology, artificial intelligence, big data, tokenization of real estate, securitization. So I think the challenge is we need to be updated with new data, new methodologies, new literature. And I'm sure that the same challenge is with the urban planning practice as well. I think these are two main challenges, economic background and being updated, because it's radically changing, very fastly changing real estate markets and planning discipline.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you're saying on the one hand, there needs to be a foundation of economic theories and economic background. And on the other hand, we need to stay up to date with everything that is happening in a very fast and dynamic environment. That, of course, is a challenge in and of itself, but probably for interdisciplinary early career researchers, they need to keep up to date what is happening in two disciplines. What would you say early career researchers can do about this feeling of feeling incomplete, of not fully understanding everything that is going on, and like slightly being overwhelmed by this complexity? Any like practical strategies of how to deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, actually, practical may not be enough. I think I find always myself very lucky because in my bachelor degree in Turkey, we have started discussing demand and supply analysis, urban rent, and then maybe this, financial analysis. So the educational background is really important. So in planning departments, we need to have that background. Other than that, even you read the literature, you need to, stay updated. It may not be so easy. But what I can suggest is interdisciplinary work, team working. So I have been really, really apart from urban planning, but in my previous workplace at the QUT, I have been working with urban planners, let's say in smart cities, smart homes. I'm doing the housing economics. They are doing more city planning part. So collaborative research with economists, I think it's really crucial because you discuss a lot, you play with data. So you exchange terminology, even terminology is different. So stay connected with urban economists. I think it's important apart from educational background.
Okay, great tips. Ed, do you want to share your impressions on the key challenges?
Yeah. There's a lot to do. You can understand me, yeah?
Yes, now it's better.
I had interesting discussions with the candidates, and what I noticed was that going more into detail, that especially the investment, how that universe is quite diverse. So it's good to leave our stereotypes behind and try to see and try to understand the diversity of not only the developers but also the investors universe. It's quite, especially the example, for instance, from France was interesting because a lot of private investors are on the scene for investing in rental housing, which is not unfamiliar in a different context as, for instance, in the Netherlands. But it's good to know that those investors, although they have, of course, a financial perspective, but quite different from for certain investors have, let's say, a business perspective. Investment is a business for them, and operating and knowledge is widely present in not only the institutional ones but also the large private investors, what we call family offices. That's a different world. That's absolutely full of a lot of expertise on not only on development processes but also on urban planning. At the other side, the private individuals who are looking for an interesting investment to be sure about their retirement. That's a different world. That's very few have sufficient experience in that field, and are quite different in when let's say how that committed to investments projects. So my emphasis or my advice would be look past that stereotype of certain stakeholders and look how different those stakeholders are in fact, take notice of that. That would at least be my advice.
Yes, I think it's great advice. And luckily in planning studies, at least slowly, there's more research on the diversity of investors or developers, but still it's very marginal, I would say.
Okay.
And sometimes, especially in planning studies, you get a lot of criticism if you basically take a more balanced or more nuanced view on the market, because people will accuse you of being pro-gentrification, pro-financialization, of downplaying big issues. What would you recommend early career scholars to do when they receive such criticism?
I would blame the public side of, let's say, of planning. When there are certain societal goals at stake, then you have the obligation as a public party to emphasize and use the instruments to prevent to prevent a trend towards, for instance,
like gentrification.
Like gentrification, that's something which takes place with the approval of public authorities, perhaps unintentional, but it takes place, and so they had to, let's say, they should have the insight and the view that the moment they agree on projects, certain impact should be avoided, and there should be a deal more more smart with the private parties to prevent that type of trends or that type of unwanted phenomena.
That ties really well back also into what Sina was just saying about the dichotomy between the state and the market, I think.
I was going to say the same, basically in the same line. The other side of the coin is all these attacks to planning and trying to limit planning, and also the importance of justifying the act of planning, both from a theoretical perspective and from a practical perspective. And as Isil mentioned, economics theories, they can really be helpful here. Thinking about externalities within, say, real estate, within real estate, and things that market fail and market failure, the areas that market fail, and then the need for planning, the regulations and intervention in the market, so to correct and internalize these externalities.
Private parties are well aware of, let's say, the responsibilities of public interventions and of public authorities, but they have to play their role with accepting that how far goes the span of control.
We also have Tuna Tashan-Kok in the call, who is also doing research on planning and real estate. So Tuna, do you have a question to the mentors and some reflections on the issue?
Thanks, Sara. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry I was late to the program. I really enjoyed this discussion, and especially hearing these very different point of views. I was thinking actually what all of you said, Isil, Sina, and Ed, about the position of planning versus real estate and studies, especially in the urban studies literature and research. There is, of course, a big criticism when it comes to urban studies scholarship. And to me, the biggest challenge for early career scholars is that they will face this criticism when they try to publish something. And it happens to us. I mean, we do research as planners in real estate, and when we try to publish them in real estate studies, we are more welcome than when we are trying to publish them in urban studies, because that requires a certain acceptance and awareness that we should balance market and position of the public sector. And I see the role of planning there as a very unique place. As planners, and I think as planning scholars, it is easier to step out and maybe zoom out from this challenging, conflicting situation, to also be a little bit more self-confident, to stop blaming. Is it public to blame? Is it the private sector to blame? We have a job to be done, and that is the urban built environment, to produce urban built environment in a fair and just way, and to satisfy the needs of the citizens living in this area. Everybody wants that. Of course, on top of that, the private sector, the property industry, has to make profit on the basis of that, because this is what they do. So if you start from this position in a confident way, my personal experience is that your fight with publishing and dealing with the reviewers is a better place in urban studies than either going to two critical ways or two acceptance ways. So I think we have a collective fight to give here, and that collective fight is to try to publish more and say this more and give this message more, that we have to work together to begin with. We cannot have these clear positions that the public sector has to deliver regulations to regulate the market, and that's it. Or the other way around, the market has to respond to the needs of the public sector. We are working together. And in that, I think I'm very much interested in new studies. I'm very much a fan of Adams and Peastal and their position about market as a social construct, how we should see market, how we should see planners as market actors. It takes a lot of confidence to say that, especially if you're an early career scholar and if you are presenting in a, critical geography or planning conference. This kind of point of views would be burned, like, how can you say this? But still, I think we have to say this collectively, because I think this is where our new working area is. And I think this is where we can make the change. I just wanted to underline this importance of this self-confidence and seeing this as a collective action as scholars working in this field for us all. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we also want to bring early career scholars together, because if you work on an issue where others share the same struggles and experiences, it's probably easier to deal with criticism like that.
Yes.
I actually also wanted to discuss more concrete publication strategies with the mentors, and Tuna already touched upon the issue. Maybe we can start with Isil, because I think you are more familiar with real estate, finance, and investment journals. How do you think planning early career scholars should approach publishing in these types of journals? Are there any recommendations you would give them?
I think I have mentioned in one of the sessions what I realized, what I observed from real estate, finance and investment journals perspective. Actually, they are really caring. They really care about political economy side in terms of, if you are discussing financialization, what's the political economy? I mean, the role of state, how active states, local governments. So this is one part, how you combine not only planning practice, but the role of the state, political economic discussions in terms of financialization, in terms of wealth inequality, so in every dimension. But other than that, what I observe is in our literature, we are more related with not, real financial or economic returns, but social impact of real estate development and real estate investment. So we are talking about climate change, housing shortage, wealth inequality, or COVID-19, and it becomes that at the end of the day, developers or real estate investors or scholars, we need to care about these social impact or environmental impact. That's why in our literature, we start publishing in like energy journals or technological transfer or more urban and real estate studies, because we start discussing, as I said, not only economic financial returns, but now how to quantify, how to measure social value of these developments or investments. And actually, it is where the opportunity combining with planning comes, because at the end of the day, how you regulate financial markets, economies, attracts different investment types, right? So that's why how active the state applying urban policies, regulating the markets, we need to combine this part in our financial analysis. That's why I think I can say, in short, our research is not more technical financial investment journals like Real Estate Economics or Journal of Real Estate Finance and Investment, but we now more publish in, as I said, energy research, social change, technological transformation, and urban studies, which again take into account social value, because it is development or investment. We are dealing with how to create value out of these development projects or investments, but focus is more, as I said, environmental and social value. I don't know if I answer, but this is very hot topic. Even in funding schemes, they care about the social and environmental part, which planning is there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I can learn from what you just said is that there's a lot happening in both disciplines. And in a way, I think they are getting closer together. So there are opportunities for scholars on both sides, and especially for those doing interdisciplinary work. Maybe moving back to the planning side, Sina, I know that you published in planning journals, and you do research, or you try to incorporate more economic theories, behavioral economic insights. How do you go about selecting a planning or urban studies journal for your work? Again, very practically, how do you make a decision? Do you look at how critical the journal is, or how do you basically do it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how practical you're asking. In terms of very practical, I normally look at my reference list and try to see where the papers that I'm referring to, I provide a reference, where are they being published, where they have been published. So that gives me an indication of my research and my area of research, the theory I'm working with journals, been a kind of a good host to them. So that's really practical view. Again, many of these publishers also have what is called journal finder. So when you enter your title or your your abstract, then it gives you a list of journals you can consider and have a look. And that's very useful, because they have this algorithm designed to introduce the best journal for yourself. And of course, then is at the end of the day is your choice. So you have to make a decision what journal you need to go for. And then, so normally there are a few papers, say 2, 3, 4, 5 papers that are the fundamental ones to your research. Again, you can see where they have been published. And that basically means, as you said, the culture of that journal, the type of paper research they are publishing. And as you said, sometimes the culture of a journal, it might be very, specific. or sometimes it might be very generic. So, for example, land use policy might publish everything. It's very broad perspective. But but then you have planning theory that really focus on planning theory, of course, not so much on practice. In terms of the research approach, what I suggest is working with the theory. It's always easy to do research and just report the finding without much of emphasis on theory. But if you're working on a particular theory, for example, in my case, I was looking at a transaction cost theory. And that really helped me to kind of like, work with the theory and then really apply that theory to different areas, say within planning or within real estate or any other policy area as well. And so I think working with theory is very fundamental in terms of being publishable, regardless of what area, what question you're addressing. And my last point here, in terms of, again, practicalities of papers and publications, I would say really focusing on implication of your work to policymaking and also contribution of your work to body of knowledge. So really emphasizing why your work is important for policymaking, what are your implications, and also what are the theoretical or empirical contributions of your work. So the readers, the reviewers really would like to see these two items, implications and contributions, very clearly in your work. Otherwise, it's just writing. It's very hard to follow.
Great, very practical tips. And I didn't even know you had an algorithm that would suggest a journal. So that's good to know. Ed, I would like to ask you a bit more about the link between theory and practice. I know you spent several years working as a practitioner as well. What would you recommend early career scholars when they reach out to the property industry, when they want to request data or interviews? Any recommendations of how to establish the contact, how to increase your chance of talking to someone working in practice?
Of course, that line of business is mostly, of course, dependent on the dynamics of the economy. But most people in the development and investor line of business is quite occupied with the daily routine. But I'm sure there is absolutely interest and preparedness to talk with academics. My impression is that there is always room for discussion or for opening, let's say, the way they are doing business, or the methods they are they are applying in their daily routine. Would I have special advice? You don't need always to talk to the let's say to the CEO of important investors or developers. Also, just talking to staff members would be quite helpful to get an impression how they view, let's say, to possibilities, to challenges. They will be quite open on that. There is much more transparency, so I would say forget your cold water temper to approach them. I'm pretty sure that if you have a clear objective what you want to know. There is in all kinds of business, so not only developers, but certainly also operators and investors. There will be ample room for interviews, and for getting data will be that will be perhaps somewhat more difficult, because that will take time, and time is costly. So, but for insights and views, there is ample room. Data will be a little bit more difficult. In that time, I would, in that case, I would suggest an internship for, let's say, quite a few months, when you are part of the team. That would offer possibilities.
That's a very interesting one, to actually ask for an internship if it's possible.
Yeah.
And I can totally relate to what you said about the insights and how to get interviews. Some of my best insights are from former students who started working for an investment company.
Yeah.
Because they had the time and they had the energy and motivation to talk with me over coffee for an hour. Whereas, it's really hard to reach CEOs or very big names.
So don't be afraid. Huh? That's very simple. Just approach them when you have an interesting question to them.
That's a very good advice in general and in life, I guess. We have a few more minutes, and there's one more point I would like to address, and that is basically the point of networks. Networking, making connections, being part of established networks, but also creating your own. Maybe I can just ask for reflections on how you should best network when you are doing interdisciplinary research. Should you go to different types of conferences? Where do you set the priorities? Basically, again, in very practical terms, what would you recommend to early career researchers? So if we can have like a final round where you can basically wrap up the discussion and give an answer to that, it would be great. Isil, do you want to start?
Okay, maybe it is not easy under this pandemic environment, but when I was doing my PhD, I always tried to participate in international conferences, both junior and senior researchers, obviously. And also, I think networking within your team, within your faculty is very important. In some universities, it works really good, but in some universities, it's a very blocked area. So I really care about these brown bag seminars. Within team collaboration and research, it really works for me. So approaching your own faculty members for collaboration work, and also international or national conferences, I can say. I know some of my students, they are really interested and they're searching for researchers, scholars, and contacting them with sending an email saying that they're really interested in this research, if there are possibilities for postdoc or similar positions. And some of them are getting actually positive feedback. And one of my previous students, he is now postdoc in Germany in the University of Marburg, by just contacting to the professor in his area. So this is all I can say. This is all come to my mind.
Good. So basically no hesitation, being confident and reaching out.
Yeah, just try your chance.
Yes, great. Thank you. Sina, any thoughts?
Yeah, definitely conferences. They're very useful. And as you say, it's unfortunate that we are all just joining conferences from our own these days. But overall, I suppose in terms of the interdisciplinary, as you mentioned, if you are more comfortable with planning, but you would like to, into real estate, then of course try to participate in conferences in real estate, and that kind of opens up that route to yourself. And vice versa, if you are working in the real estate and you want to enter the world of planners, then of course there are some planning conferences that you can participate. So that's conferences, and of course present your work all the time, and that's really helpful, because when people know what you're doing, you'll be approached by people, and you'll be introduced to so many opportunities. And then the final point to make is perhaps, as Isil mentioned, just email people, particularly if you have published the paper, maybe share it with people who you think are relevant, and they might actually enjoy, and just be in touch with people. And thankfully, sending an email is free, so you can send as many emails as you want, as you can and you want. And really, the worst thing can happen is you might not get an answer. So that's really the worst can happen. But there's no, as I said, there's no cost to send emails to people.
Okay, great. Ed, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I just would like to react to all of you, in particular Pierre and Anne-Christine, but also the other one, PhD candidates. Send me an email. I definitely will answer. I can bring you into contact with the network I'm in, not only in Groningen, but in at least within the Netherlands. There is a lot of interesting publications, mostly in English. So don't hesitate to put questions on in that email, and I will try to do my best to answer as far as my knowledge reaches. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I think it counts to everyone. So also from the pitches in the beginning, if you think, oh, it's interesting, I just invite you to reach out, have a lunch meeting online, and just chat. Actually, that is really helpful. Okay. We're reaching the end, and first of all, I would like to thank all the mentors for their valuable recommendations and the time. Really appreciate it. And then I would like to give the floor to Tuna for like a final reflection, and also maybe you can connect it a little bit to the UGoveRN network. Say a few words about that.
Thank you, Sara. That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I missed your pitches, but I can imagine, I looked at your materials also, how interesting they are. I think to wrap up on the networking and the importance of going a step further, it's very important to be outspoken about your research, and to be in the right networks and find the right platforms to communicate. Because today is the era of communication. I mean, people not only publish now, people put tweeters about their publications. This is what I published. So because this is how things go, and then there are hundreds and thousands of people follow what you were saying in your, or you write blogs or communicate. So in that sense, I think, I mean, I don't need to tell you that I'm an old generation scholar in that respect. You are in it, but use those resources very well for your research, and be in the right platforms. And in that sense, of course, UGoveRN as a platform is there for this kind of purposes. Basically, for the last few years, because I was myself a young scholar once upon a time in the Netherlands, trying to establish myself, going through these challenges about doing a PhD in this gray zone, where you are being criticized by both sides of the coin. And then you try to establish yourself, and you are not sure about whether what you say makes sense to anyone. And I realized that if you have friends around you, and friends within brackets like networks, that you can share those feelings and ideas, and those people tell you, hey, I actually do the same thing, and maybe, you know, it gives you more confidence. And that's why we established UGoveRN. And it was first with our own PhD students, and Sara and Andrea Garza joined me in that to coordinate this platform. But now we are opening up, having new members, having these webinars and platforms to give voice to early career scholars, others as well, but mainly early career scholars to have these platforms. So I would say, get in touch with us, come up with ideas. We are always open for creativity, and tell us, hey, I want to organize something, a seminar, a webinar. I want to publish. We have a website. We can accommodate things. We can offer you connections. We can link different disciplines. So yeah, welcome everyone. That's, I think, going to be my final words.
Thank you, Tuna. Again, thank you to the mentors. We will now enter like the networking, informal networking stage, especially with everyone from the early career scholars. You are, of course, welcome to join, but we will have some breakout rooms where we just team up, and we will have very short presentations of the partnering early career network organizations of the Connect 21 project. So feel free to stay around, but also don't feel obliged to stay on. Same goes to the early career participants. This is absolutely voluntary, but we thought, just instead of just talking about the importance of networks, again, we make it very practical. So we have representatives of 3 early career networks present. We have Lydio from the ASOP Young Academics. We have Kofi from the Future Leaders of the African Real Estate Society. And we have Simon of the ERS PhD Network. And I would just like to invite you to speak 3-4 minutes, present your network, explain what you do and what you have to offer. Lydio, would you like to start?
Yes. Oh, I hope you had an interesting seminar today. At least the discussions I managed to catch up were quite interesting and very useful. I represent the ASOP Young Academics Network. ASOP is the Association of European Schools of Planning. What we do is that we support the young academics to connect with the organization of ASOP, as well as take part in their activities. We also have some of our own initiatives, which I'll present very briefly today. So firstly, the Young Academics Network has a coordination team, usually composed by 5 people. And one of them is the chair, who sits in the ASOP Executive Committee as well. Some activities, we have a conference in spring. This year will be between the 5th and the 8th of April in Istanbul. The deadline for abstracts is the 30th of November 2021. So it's quite soon if you want to apply. We've also opened the call for organizing the 2023 ASOP Young Academics ASOP Conference. And the deadline for that is the 30th of March. So again, if you are interested and want to get together with a group of your colleagues to apply for organizing the conference, that would be great. We have a PhD workshop, which is usually organized 1 week before the annual Congress of ASOP. This year will be in Tartu in Estonia. The deadline, the call for applications will come out soon, so around December. It's usually aimed at PhD students in their 2nd and 3rd years. It also grants you a free participation at the Congress afterwards. We have some interesting projects as well. One of them is called ASOP Memories, which gives young academics the opportunity to interview some of the founding members of ASOP. And this time we have opened a call for 2 young academics to interview Patsy Hildy and Klaus Kunzmann. So that's also a very interesting opportunity. The applications for that are by the 10th of December. We have our own open access peer-reviewed journal called PlanNext. We have a call for papers now, which is out, called Cities in the Face of Crisis, Planning and Designing in the Future. And the deadline for abstract is on the 31st of November. We have also a blog where you can write semi-academic papers or publications. That's all in our website, so feel free to visit and get in contact also with the editor-in-chief of the blog. And last but not least, we have also a booklet series, which basically is a conversation about planning theories and practices between a more experienced academic and a young academic. And we have the call open now for two conversations, one with Eric Swingdo and the second with Ali Madanipur, sorry. The deadline is the 30th of November 2021, and luckily we have also Sina here, who is a member of the editorial board. And yeah, I mean, we have a lot of, we offer a lot of opportunities for networking. So if you are interested, please join the ESOP Young Academics Network. And yeah, hope to see you in our future activities.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you.
Next up, I would like to invite Kofi from the Future Leaders of the African Real Estate Society. Unfortunately, we didn't have any participant from your network organization in this seminar, but we would really like to collaborate also in the future much more with the African Real Estate Society, especially the young people. So we're very excited to hear a little bit about your network.
Yes, so basically I'm the current chair for the Future Leaders of the African Real Estate Society. And so just a brief history. The African Real Estate Society actually began in 1997, and the main idea is to promote networking amongst researchers across, property researchers across Africa. And we are affiliated to the mother body, which is the International Real Estate Society. Then we have our affiliates as the American Real Estate Society, the Asian Real Estate Society, European Real Estate Society, Pacific Rim, and then Latin America Real Estate Society. So it's quite a big body, and the membership is basically academics employed in both private and public sectors. Now our activities, our critical activities are basically having a common platform where property professionals can interact among themselves. And how we do this is to present various cutting-edge research, develop educational curricula across the various countries, as well as promoting opportunities for debates on topical issues which are relevant within the continent. And we do this through seminars, annual conferences, technical workshops, webinars, and all the other options which are available to us, especially now also during the pandemic. So the reason why we had to form, this Future Leaders of the African Real Estate Society was basically there was a decline in new membership, basically due to an aging membership. So the younger folks found it difficult joining because there was no platform to join. And then there also seemed to be a lack of a succession plan. So because it is aging, there is no bridge to bring up new people in there. Now we saw a potential to change that narrative, because there are a number of real estate programs which are being introduced across the continent in Africa. Then we saw it that if we had a youth-led approach, it would be easier in terms of the early career professionals and researchers volunteering. So our target basically is that academics, researchers, and professionals. So we saw it here as an urgent call, and also to encourage our younger colleagues to join. So, and then by doing that, we have an annual mentorship program where, participants can be on, and then they are mentored by senior, colleagues. And then the good thing about our mentorship program is that it is not only limited to mentors within the continent. There are mentors across the world who we have access to. Then we also promote volunteering. And in this case also, a number of participants could also join and serve during as organizing committee members within the various programs that we organize. And also we also promote active participation. The African Real Estate Society has a journal, which is called the Journal of African Real Estate Research. So it publishes, peer-reviewed articles across the continent and other papers which are of interest to the continent. Then our first meeting, so this is quite new, and the first meeting was held in 2019 in Arusha, Tanzania, where we had only 20 attendees. Currently, we have an active participation of close to 96 people on our WhatsApp platform, where we frequently interact and then share, job opportunities, we share scholarship options, many things go on the platform. And then it's also a complement to the organization, because then there is a huge chunk of early career researchers and professionals who are encouraged to join the mother organization. So in our case, what we did was to make a publication of the activities, of the history for the Flafferys, and also how it fits into the mother organization, so that any person who comes in as a leader has a fair idea, has a document to look at, and how to steer the organization further. So for the founding, I'm part of the founding directors of the Flafferys, and I'll be leaving the scene next year. And so we have basically just 3 executives, which is the chairperson, the vice chair, and the programs chair, who run the affairs. And that's basically for Afri. So maybe if anybody has any further questions, you could ask. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much. That was great. And especially the fact that you said COVID actually triggered a lot of webinars, a lot of collaboration online. We really also benefited from that in the Connect 21 project. We got your organization partnering with our webinars. So I also encourage everyone to make use of that. If you already look at where we are all based in this meeting, we are very much a global meeting at this point. So that is great. Then we have Simon. Simon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sarah, could you also make me share the screen? Because then I would just open a short presentation.
Yes, should work.
Cheers. Now. As Sarah already introduced the Ares PhD network, I also want to introduce myself. My name is Simon Thaler. I'm working at the University of Applied Sciences in Kufstein, and just shortly want to say something about my research interests, which are behavioral real estate and something completely different called convolutional neural networks. So like analyzing pictures with machine learning algorithms. Furthermore, I'm, as already you might know, I'm a member of the Ares PhD Network Board, together with Sasha Jans, Deborah Rezinski, Sebastian Will, me, and Monique Arkstein, which is the representative of the Ares board for our network. The goals of our network are to share, in the first place, quality PhD content among all the scholars that want to interact within our network. So we therefore have a WhatsApp group. I can send that link to that group into the chat later on. And we also want you to somehow accelerate your PhD by exchanging your ideas, discussing your ideas within the groups or face-to-face with one of the other PhD students. Furthermore, we are also sharing career opportunities, which pop up all around Europe. And in the end, we also want you to build your PhD network. Because as already mentioned in the panel discussion today, building your PhD network in the academics is really important, which also brings us to our next event, where you're warmly welcome if you want to join. It's on the 18th of January 2022 at 3:30 to 5. If you're interested, just drop me an email. I'll post my email into the chat after my discussion. where we, at this event, we want to connect researchers with each other, meaning that if you have an idea as a PhD student, you should quickly write an abstract, send it to us until the 13th of December, I think was the date. But there is also another later date, but that would be good if we have it until then. And then we want to match you with some assistant professors or other PhD students which are more experienced, and so you can work on those ideas together, so that we really some kind of bring together research paths, and and so we would be grateful if you hand in some ideas there, because therefore you can furthermore increase your network by finding new co-authors. That's the main idea, which popped up due to the last ARIS meeting, where we weren't too many participants in the get-together after the conference. So we thought maybe it's a good idea to do something like matchmaking for research. To our other events that we had a very interesting event in the beginning of October, together with Gunther Meyer, the ARIS president. Currently, he talked about hedonic pricing in research, and there were quite a lot of participants. We really enjoyed the discussion afterwards, and of course learned a lot about the hedonic pricing model, which still is one of the mostly used valuation models in real estate research. Then also another upcoming event that is maybe of interest is the ARIS conference in, I do not recall the date exactly, but anyways, in the week of the conference, we will host an event as the ARIS PhD Network. It's most likely an evening event where we warmly welcome you to join, to meet up, to build your network. So we would be very grateful to welcome you there. So if you are interested into connecting with our network, just send me an email. I will now post the link to the chat together with the link for the WhatsApp group. And thanks for your attention.
Well, thank you for all this information. Really useful, lots of opportunities. Basically, the formal program ends now, but we thought we would have 2 random 10-minute breakout rooms where we match 2 people, whoever is interested. You can talk about life, about research, just to connect. Basically, it's free to participate. You're not obliged, but last time it was really fun to have a bit of a loose conversation after a very academic day. So if you are participating, just stay around, and NACWA will just randomly assign always 2 people into one room for 10 minutes, and then we shuffle, and then we close today's seminar.